The dust cloud rose behind her wagon like a funeral shroud, and Daisy Emerson knew she was in real trouble when the whole world tilted sideways with a sickening crack that echoed across the empty Arizona territory. She gripped the reins as her two horses stamped nervously, their ears flicking back toward the broken wheel that now lay splintered against a rock, half the spokes shattered beyond any hope of repair. The sun beat down mercilessly on this stretch of desert between Flagstaff and what she hoped would be Ash Fork, though she had not seen another soul for hours and was beginning to wonder if she had taken a wrong turn somewhere, back where the trail forked near the dried creek bed. It was July of 1882, and Daisy had been traveling alone for 3 days since leaving her brother's family in Flagstaff, determined to reach the small settlement where she had secured a position as a schoolteacher. At 22 years old, she had thought herself capable and independent enough to make the journey with just her wagon, 2 horses, and the supplies she had packed so carefully. Now, staring at the wreckage of her wheel, she felt foolish and frightened in equal measure. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, nothing but scrub brush, red rocks, and the occasional twisted juniper tree breaking the monotony of sand and stone. She climbed down carefully, her dark blue traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of dust, and examined the damage. The wheel had not just broken, but had practically exploded when it hit that rock, which she had not seen in time to avoid. Some of the spokes were completely gone, others hung at odd angles, and the rim itself had a crack running through it that made her heart sink even further. She had no idea how to fix such a thing, and even if she did, she had no spare wheel, no tools that would be adequate for the job, and no experience in carpentry or wagon repair. The horses whinnied softly and she went to them, stroking their necks and murmuring reassurances she did not feel. They had water at least, and she rationed it carefully from the barrel she had secured in the wagon bed. She gave them each a small amount in the bucket she carried, then allowed herself a few sips from her canteen. The sun was past its highest point, but still blazing hot, and she knew she needed to make a decision soon about what to do. Walking was not an option. She had no idea how far she still had to travel, and carrying enough water on foot would be impossible. Staying with the wagon seemed equally foolish, as she had seen no other travelers on this road, and she could not be certain anyone would come along before her supplies ran out. She was considering whether she should try to ride one of the horses bareback, leaving the wagon and most of her possessions behind, when she heard something that made her freeze. Hoofbeats, distant, but growing closer. Daisy felt a surge of relief, followed immediately by fear. She was a woman alone in the middle of nowhere, and while most people were decent, she had heard enough stories to know that not everyone who crossed these lonely roads had good intentions. She reached into the wagon and pulled out the small pistol her brother had insisted she carry, checking that it was loaded, before tucking it into the deep pocket of her dress where she could reach it quickly if needed. The rider appeared over a rise to the east, a dark figure against the bright sky. He was moving at an easy pace, and as he drew closer, Daisy could make out more details. He sat tall in the saddle on a paint horse, wearing a dusty brown hat, a dark shirt, and worn denim pants tucked into scuffed boots. A bandana was tied around his neck, and she could see the glint of something metallic at his hip that was probably a gun. He had broad shoulders and moved with the easy confidence of someone who spent most of his life on horseback. When he was close enough to see her clearly, he slowed his horse to a walk and approached carefully, as if he understood that a lone woman might be nervous about a stranger. He touched the brim of his hat in greeting, and Daisy got her first good look at his face. He was young, probably not much older than she was, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes that were an unusual shade of green. His face was lean and handsome in a rough way, with a few days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice a pleasant drawl that immediately put her somewhat at ease. "Looks like you have run into some trouble." "My wheel broke," Daisy said, stating the obvious because she could not think of what else to say. "I hit a rock and it just shattered." The cowboy dismounted smoothly and walked over to examine the damage, crouching down beside the broken wheel with a low whistle. "That is quite a break," he said, running his hand over the splintered wood. "You are lucky it did not flip the whole wagon." "I know," Daisy said quietly. "I have been trying to figure out what to do. I am headed to Ash Fork, but I do not know how far it still is, and I cannot exactly continue like this." He stood up and looked at her with those green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Ash Fork is still a good 15 miles west of here," he said. "Too far to walk in this heat, especially carrying water for yourself and your animals." He paused, seeming to consider something, then added, "My name is Garrett Yates. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of here. I have tools there, wood, everything I would need to fix this wheel properly. If you would like, I could fix it for you." Daisy felt a wave of relief so strong it made her dizzy. "Could you really? I would be so grateful. I have some money. I could pay you for your time and materials." Garrett shook his head. "No need for that. But it is going to take some time to do it right, probably a few hours at least. And I cannot do it out here in the sun with no proper workspace." He seemed to be weighing his words carefully, as if he understood how his next suggestion might sound. "What I am proposing is this. I can rig up a temporary fix that will let your wagon roll slowly, and you can follow me back to my ranch. I will fix the wheel properly there, make sure it is sturdy enough to get you the rest of the way to Ash Fork safely. You can rest, water your horses, maybe have a decent meal while I work. Then, when it is done, I will point you in the right direction, and you can be on your way. Or, if it gets too late, you are welcome to stay the night in the guest room and leave fresh in the morning." It was a generous offer, almost too generous, and Daisy felt her natural caution warring with her desperate situation. She studied Garrett's face, looking for any sign of deception or ill intent, but all she saw was honest concern and a straightforward desire to help. There was something open and trustworthy about him, and she had always prided herself on being a good judge of character. "That is very kind of you," she said slowly. "I accept your offer, Mr. Yates, and thank you." "Just Garrett is fine," he said with a small smile. "Now, let me see what I can do to get this wagon mobile enough to make it to the ranch." He went to his horse and retrieved a coil of rope and some tools from his saddlebag, then set to work on the broken wheel with an efficiency that spoke of years of experience with such repairs. Daisy watched as he secured the broken pieces as best he could, using rope and a piece of wood from her wagon bed to create a makeshift brace that would at least keep the wheel from falling apart completely. "This is not going to be pretty, and we will have to go real slow," he said as he worked. "But it should hold long enough to get us there. You are going to need to trust me to guide you, though. The trail to my place is not well marked, and if you miss it, you will end up heading toward the mountains instead." "I will follow your lead," Daisy assured him. It took him nearly an hour to rig up the temporary fix, and by the time he was done, his shirt was soaked with sweat and his hands were covered in dust and wood splinters. He tested the wheel carefully, making sure it could still turn even if it looked precarious. "All right," he said finally. "Let us take this real slow. I will ride ahead and you follow behind me. If you feel anything starting to give way, you holler and we will stop." Daisy climbed back onto the wagon seat and gathered the reins, her heart beating fast, with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Garrett mounted his paint horse and started north, away from the main trail, and she followed as carefully as she could. The wagon lurched and swayed with every bump, and the broken wheel made an alarming grinding sound, but Garrett's temporary fix held. They moved across the desert landscape at a pace that felt agonizingly slow, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Daisy found herself watching Garrett as he rode ahead of her, noting the easy way he sat in the saddle, the way he occasionally turned to check on her progress, the capable confidence in every movement. He was clearly a man who knew this land intimately, who was comfortable in the harsh beauty of the Arizona territory in a way she could only admire. After about an hour of careful travel, the landscape began to change subtly. They entered a wide valley between two low mesas, and Daisy could see green in the distance, which meant water. As they drew closer, she spotted trees, cottonwoods, and willows clustered along what must be a creek or spring, and then she saw the buildings. Garrett's ranch was modest but well-maintained, consisting of a main house built of adobe with a wooden porch, a large barn, a corral with several horses, and a few outbuildings she assumed were for storage and equipment. It was an oasis in the desert, and Daisy felt a profound sense of relief at the sight of it. Garrett led her straight to the barn, where there was enough space and shelter to work on the wagon properly. He helped her unhitch her horses and showed her where they could drink from a trough that was fed by a spring, then led them into the barn, where there were clean stalls with hay already laid out. "You take care of your horses and get yourself settled," he said. "There is a pump by the house where you can wash up if you want. I am going to gather my tools and take a proper look at that wheel." Daisy did as he suggested, tending to her horses first, making sure they had food and water and were comfortable after their ordeal. Then she walked to the house, where she found the pump exactly where Garrett had described. The water was cool and clear, and she drank deeply before washing her face and hands, feeling the grit and dust of the trail sluice away. She looked around the ranch with growing curiosity. Everything was neat and orderly, the work of someone who took pride in his property. There were chickens scratching in a yard near the house, a vegetable garden that was surprisingly lush given the arid climate, and what looked like a small herd of cattle in a pasture beyond the barn. It was not a wealthy spread, but it was clearly prosperous and well run. When she returned to the barn, Garrett had removed the broken wheel from her wagon and had it laid out on a workbench. He was examining it closely, testing each spoke and studying the damage with the focus of a craftsman assessing a difficult job. "It is worse than I thought," he said when he noticed her. "I am going to have to rebuild almost the entire wheel. I have the wood and the tools to do it, but it is going to take me most of the evening and probably some of tomorrow morning to do it right. I do not want to send you back out on the road with anything less than a wheel that is as strong as new." "I understand," Daisy said. "I truly appreciate everything you are doing. I feel terrible for imposing on you like this." Garrett looked up from the wheel and met her eyes. "You are not imposing. I cannot exactly leave a lady stranded in the desert, now can I? My mother would rise from her grave and give me an earful if I did something like that." There was a hint of sadness in his voice when he mentioned his mother, and Daisy wondered about his story, about how he came to be out here running a ranch alone. "Do you run this place by yourself?" she asked. "Mostly," he said. "I have a hand, Jose, who helps with the cattle and the heavy work, but he is off visiting his family in Flagstaff right now. It is just me until he gets back next week." He turned his attention back to the wheel. "Listen, you should go up to the house and rest. There is food in the kitchen. Help yourself to whatever you want. The guest room is the second door on the left upstairs. Make yourself at home." "Are you sure?" Daisy asked. "I could stay out here and help you. I do not know much about wagon wheels, but I can learn." Garrett smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warm and almost boyish. "I appreciate the offer, but this is going to be tedious work, lots of measuring and cutting and fitting. You would be bored out of your mind within an hour. Go rest, really. You have had a long day." Daisy wanted to argue, but she was exhausted and dusty, and the thought of a quiet place to sit down was overwhelmingly appealing. She nodded and made her way to the house, climbing the steps to the porch and pushing open the front door. The interior of the house was cooler than outside, the thick adobe walls keeping the heat at bay. The main room was simply furnished, but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, a few chairs, a table, and shelves lined with books. Daisy was surprised by the books. There must have been 50 or 60 of them, an impressive collection for a ranch in the middle of the Arizona territory. She walked over to examine the titles and found everything from novels by Dickens and Hawthorne to practical guides on ranching and animal husbandry, as well as several volumes of poetry. The kitchen was through an archway, and Daisy found it well stocked with staples like flour, beans, coffee, and dried meat, as well as fresh vegetables from the garden. Her stomach reminded her that she had not eaten since morning, so she put together a simple meal of bread, cheese, and some cold chicken she found wrapped in cloth. She made enough for two and left Garrett's portion covered on the table, then carried her own plate back to the main room. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, and found herself thinking about Garrett Yates. He was not what she had expected when she had seen a lone rider approaching in the desert. He was young, probably only 25 or 26. And there was an intelligence in his eyes that matched the collection of books on his shelves. He had been nothing but courteous and helpful, and she felt her initial wariness melting away into something like curiosity. After she finished eating, she explored a bit more, finding the guest room exactly where Garrett had said it would be. It was small but clean, with a real bed covered in a quilt that looked handmade, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the valley. Daisy poured water into the basin and washed more thoroughly, then changed into a cleaner dress from her belongings, which Garrett had thoughtfully carried up from the wagon. The sun was setting when she went back downstairs, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and purple. She could see a light burning in the barn, and she walked out toward it, drawn by a combination of restlessness and curiosity. Garrett was exactly where she had left him, bent over the workbench with the wheel components spread around him. He had removed his hat, and his dark hair was damp with sweat. He was in the process of carefully shaping a new spoke, his hands moving with practiced precision. "You should be resting. he said without looking up. I rested, Daisy replied, and I left some food for you in the kitchen. You should eat. I will when I finish this section, Garrett said. I want to get all the spokes cut and shaped tonight so I can start assembly first thing in the morning. Daisy pulled up a stool and sat down where she could watch him work without being in the way. How did you learn to do all this? She asked. My father, Garrett said. He taught me everything about running a ranch, fixing things, being self-sufficient out here. You have to be able to do a bit of everything when you are this far from town. He paused in his work and finally looked at her. What about you? You said you were heading to Ash Fork. What is waiting for you there? A teaching position, Daisy said. They are starting a proper school, and they hired me to teach the children. I am coming from St. Louis originally, but I have been staying with my brother in Flagstaff for the past few months, getting used to the territory. That is quite a change from St. Louis, Garrett observed. What made you want to come all the way out here? Daisy considered how much to tell him, then decided there was no harm in honesty. I wanted something different, she said. I was engaged back in St. Louis, but I broke it off. He was a banker's son, very respectable and suitable, but there was no passion, no real connection. I realized I would rather be alone than trapped in a loveless marriage. My family was horrified when I called off the engagement, and I needed to get away, start fresh somewhere new. When I saw the advertisement for the teaching position, it felt like a sign. Garrett had stopped working and was listening intently. That took courage, he said. A lot of women would have gone through with it for the sake of security. Maybe, Daisy said, but I could not do it. I kept thinking about my parents' marriage. They loved each other so much, you could see it in every look, every touch. My father died 5 years ago, and my mother still talks about him like he just stepped out of the room. I wanted that. I wanted real love, not just a comfortable arrangement. I understand that, Garrett said quietly. My parents were the same way. My father died when I was 18, fell from a horse and broke his neck. My mother never really recovered from it. She died 2 years later, and I think she just gave up without him. It was like she did not want to keep going in a world where he was not there beside her. I am sorry, Daisy said, and she meant it. She could hear the grief still lingering in his voice, even though it must have been several years since he had lost them both. It is all right, Garrett said. I have made my peace with it. This ranch was their dream, and I am keeping it going for them. It is what they would have wanted. He picked up his tools again. But it does get lonely out here sometimes. Jose is good company when he is around, but it is not the same as family. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, Daisy watching as Garrett worked, occasionally asking questions about what he was doing. He explained the process patiently, showing her how each spoke had to be shaped to fit precisely into the hub and the rim, how the angles had to be exact or the wheel would be weak and unbalanced. As the evening deepened into night, Garrett finally set down his tools and stretched, his back cracking audibly. I am done for tonight, he said. I have all the pieces cut and ready. Tomorrow I will assemble it and make sure everything is solid. You should eat, Daisy reminded him, and rest. Yes, madam, he said, with a slight smile that made her heart do an unexpected flutter. They walked back to the house together, and Garrett devoured the food she had left for him, while Daisy made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table talking late into the night, the conversation flowing easily between them. Garrett told her about the ranch, about the challenges of raising cattle in the desert, about the beauty of the land when the rains came and everything bloomed. Daisy told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about her love of teaching, about the books she had read and the places she dreamed of seeing someday. It was past midnight when they finally parted ways, Garrett heading to his room downstairs and Daisy climbing the stairs to the guest room. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the cowboy downstairs. There was something about him that drew her in, a combination of strength and gentleness, competence and vulnerability. She barely knew him, and yet she felt more comfortable with him than she had with her former fiancé after months of courtship. She told herself it was just gratitude, that she was simply thankful for his help and his hospitality. But as she drifted off to sleep, she knew it was something more than that, something that both excited and frightened her. The next morning, Daisy woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through the window. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find that Garrett was already up and had coffee brewing on the stove. He looked tired, and she wondered if he had slept at all. Morning, he said, pouring her a cup of coffee without being asked. I hope you slept well. I did, thank you, Daisy said. What about you? Well enough, he said, which she suspected was not entirely true. I am going to get started on the wheel as soon as I finish this coffee. With any luck, I will have it done by early afternoon. Can I help? Daisy asked again. This time Garrett nodded. Actually, yes. When I start putting it together, I could use an extra pair of hands to hold things steady while I work, if you're willing. Of course, Daisy said. They ate a quick breakfast of eggs and biscuits, then headed to the barn together. Garrett had all the wheel components laid out in precise order, and Daisy watched in fascination as he began the delicate process of assembly. He was patient and methodical, carefully fitting each spoke into the hub, checking and rechecking the angles before securing them in place. When he needed her help, Daisy held pieces steady while he worked, following his instructions carefully. She found herself admiring not just his skill, but the way he approached the work, with respect for the craft and a determination to do it right. His hands were strong and calloused, but surprisingly gentle when needed, and she felt a little thrill every time their fingers accidentally touched as they worked together. The morning passed quickly, and by noon, the wheel was taking shape. Garrett attached the rim carefully, using techniques that had been passed down through generations of wagon makers, then spent another hour making sure every connection was solid and secure. Finally, he rolled the completed wheel across the barn floor, testing it for balance and stability. It is good, he said with satisfaction. As strong as new, maybe stronger. This should get you to Ash Fork and beyond with no problems. They worked together to reattach the wheel to Daisy's wagon, and when it was done, Garrett hitched up her horses and drove the wagon out into the yard, circling it slowly to make sure everything was working properly. Perfect, he said, climbing down. You are all set. Daisy should have felt relieved and happy, but instead, she felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. She was not ready to leave yet, not ready to say goodbye to Garrett and this place that had felt like a refuge. I cannot thank you enough, she said. You have been so kind, and you have saved me from what could have been a disaster. Please, let me pay you something. Garrett shook his head firmly. I told you, no payment needed. I was happy to help. Then at least let me make lunch before I go, Daisy insisted. It is the least I can do. Garrett looked like he was going to argue, but then he smiled. All right, I will not say no to that. To be honest, my cooking is pretty terrible. It would be nice to eat something that actually tastes good for once. They went back to the house, and Daisy took over the kitchen with the confidence of someone who had been cooking since childhood. She found flour and lard and made biscuits from scratch, fried up some of the dried meat with onions and peppers from the garden, and even made a simple apple cobbler with some preserved fruit she found in the pantry. Garrett watched her work with open admiration. You are quite good at this, he said. I enjoy cooking, Daisy replied. There is something satisfying about taking simple ingredients and turning them into something nourishing and delicious. They ate together on the porch, where there was a slight breeze that made the heat more bearable. The food was simple but good, and Garrett ate with the enthusiasm of a man who had been living on his own, cooking for too long. This is wonderful, he said between bites. I had forgotten what real food tastes like. Daisy laughed. It is not that special, just basic home cooking. Maybe, Garrett said, but it tastes special to me. After lunch, they sat on the porch in companionable silence, neither of them seeming eager to acknowledge that it was time for Daisy to leave. The sun was past its peak, and if she left now, she could probably make it to Ash Fork before dark. But something was holding her back, some unspoken feeling that leaving now would mean leaving something important behind. Garrett, she said finally, breaking the silence. Can I ask you something? Anything, he said. Do you ever think about leaving here, going somewhere with more people, more opportunities? Garrett considered the question carefully. Sometimes, he admitted, especially on the hard days when the cattle are sick or the spring runs dry, or I'm trying to fix something for the 10th time and it keeps breaking. But then I will see the sun rise over the mesa, or I will sit on this porch and watch the stars come out. And I remember why I stay. This land gets in your blood. It is harsh and unforgiving, but it is also beautiful and free in a way that nowhere else is. My parents built something here, and I want to keep building on what they started. That is a good reason, Daisy said softly. What about you? Garrett asked. Do you think you will stay in Ash Fork after your teaching contract is done? I do not know, Daisy said honestly. I suppose it depends on whether I like it there, whether I feel like I am making a difference. But I want to build something too. Something that matters. I want a life that means something. Garrett looked at her with those green eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. I think you will do that, he said. You have that quality about you, like you are meant for important things. Daisy felt herself blushing and looked away. You barely know me. How can you tell? I am a pretty good judge of character, Garrett said. It comes from spending so much time with animals. You learn to read what is not being said out loud, and everything about you says strength and determination and heart. They held each other's gaze for a long moment, and Daisy felt the air between them practically crackling with unspoken feelings. She wanted to say something, to tell him that she felt it too, this connection that seemed to have formed impossibly fast between them. But before she could find the words, Garrett stood up abruptly. I should let you get going, he said, his voice a little rough. You want to make it to Ash Fork before dark. Daisy stood too, feeling the moment slipping away. Yes, I suppose I should. Garrett walked with her to the wagon and checked it one more time to make sure everything was secure. He helped her climb onto the seat, his hand lingering on hers for just a second longer than necessary. You take care of yourself, he said. And if you ever need anything, if you ever run into trouble, you remember where I am. My ranch is always open to you. Thank you, Garrett, Daisy said, and she could hear the emotion in her own voice. For everything. She picked up the reins, ready to start her horses moving, when Garrett spoke again. Daisy, wait. She looked down at him, her heart suddenly pounding. I know this might sound crazy, he said, and she could see that he was nervous, his hands fidgeting with his hat. We have only known each other for a day, and I do not have any right to ask this, but I cannot let you just drive away without saying something. What is it? Daisy asked, barely breathing. Let's follow me home, Garrett said, the words coming out in a rush. Not now. I know you have a job waiting for you in Ash Fork, and you should go do that. But after, when your contract is up, or if it does not work out, follow me home. Come back here. I know it is too soon to say this, but I have never felt this way about anyone before. From the moment I saw you standing there beside your broken wagon, looking so determined and brave, even though you were clearly frightened, I felt something. And then talking to you last night, getting to know you, it just got stronger. I am not good with words, but what I am trying to say is that I think you are special, and I would really like the chance to see where this could go between us. Daisy sat frozen on the wagon seat, her mind racing. Everything sensible in her said this was crazy, that you could not fall for someone you had just met, that she should politely decline and go on her way. But her heart, the same heart that had told her to break off her engagement and come west in the first place, was singing a different tune. Garrett, she said slowly. I feel it too. I thought maybe I was imagining it, or that it was just gratitude making me feel this way. But it is more than that, is it not? Yes, Garrett said, his eyes lighting up with hope. It is so much more than that. I have to go to Ash Fork, Daisy said. I committed to teaching there, and I cannot break my word. I know, Garrett said quickly. I am not asking you to. I am just asking you to remember that I am here, and that I will be waiting if you want to come back. Daisy made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. She set the reins down and climbed down from the wagon, standing directly in front of Garrett. What if I visit? She asked. Ash Fork is not that far away. What if I come see you on weekends when I do not have classes? Garrett's face broke into the biggest smile she had seen from him yet. I would like that, he said. I would like that very much. Before she could second-guess herself, Daisy reached up and kissed him, just a brief press of her lips against his. It was her first kiss with him, and it felt like lightning and coming home all at once. When they pulled apart, Garrett was looking at her with wonder. You are amazing. Do you know that? I am crazy, Daisy said, but she was smiling. This is absolutely crazy. Maybe, Garrett agreed, but sometimes the best things are a little crazy. He helped her back onto the wagon, and this time when she picked up the reins, it did not feel like goodbye. It felt like the beginning of something. Follow the main road west for about 10 miles, Garrett told her, shifting back into practical mode. You will see a fork, and you want to take the right path. That will lead you straight into Ash Fork. The schoolhouse is on the main street. You cannot miss it. I will find it, Daisy said. And I will see you again soon. Maybe next Sunday? Next Sunday, Garrett confirmed. I will be waiting. Daisy drove away from the ranch, looking back over her shoulder until Garrett and the buildings disappeared from view. Her heart was full of a giddy mixture of excitement and fear. She had come west looking for a new life, for independence and purpose, and she had found that. But she had also found something she had not been looking for, something that felt like it might be exactly what she needed. The new wheel rolled smoothly, and Daisy made good time on the road to Ash Fork. The town appeared just as the sun was setting, a small collection of buildings clustered along a dusty main street. The schoolhouse was exactly where Garrett said it would be, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower. Beside it was a small cottage that she assumed would be her living quarters. A woman came out of the cottage as Daisy pulled up, a gray-haired lady with a kind face and a welcoming smile. "You must be Miss Emerson," she said. "We were starting to worry about you. I am Mrs. Adelaide Frost, head of the school board." "I apologize for arriving so late," Daisy said as she climbed down from the wagon. "I had some trouble on the road, but it has been resolved now. No harm done, dear. You are here safe and sound, and that is what matters. Let me help you get settled in." The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Daisy threw herself into preparing for her students, organizing the classroom, reviewing the curriculum, and meeting the families in town. Ash Fork was small but growing, with about 200 residents mostly consisting of ranchers, miners, and railroad workers. The children she would be teaching ranged in age from 6 to 14, and there were 23 of them on her roster. She met the other teachers, visited with the families, and tried to make a good impression on everyone. But through it all, her thoughts kept drifting back to Garrett. She would find herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering the way he had looked at her, the gentleness in his strong hands, the sound of his voice when he had asked her to follow him home. The week felt endless, but finally Sunday arrived. Daisy woke before dawn, too excited to sleep, and dressed carefully in her best day dress. She packed a basket with food and supplies, borrowed a horse from Mr. Frost, who ran the general store, and set off toward Garrett's ranch as soon as it was light enough to see the road. The journey that had seemed so long and dangerous before now felt like nothing. She knew the way, and more importantly, she knew where she was going and who would be waiting for her at the end. When she saw the valley between the mesas and the green of the trees around Garrett's ranch, her heart started racing. Garrett must have been watching for her because he came out of the barn before she even reached the house. He was smiling, and when he helped her down from the horse, he pulled her into a tight embrace that made her feel safe and wanted and home. "You came," he said, his voice full of relief and joy. "Of course I came," Daisy replied. "Did you think I would not?" "I hoped you would," Garrett admitted. "But I was afraid that maybe you would think better of it, that maybe what happened between us was too fast, and you would decide to stay away." "I thought about that," Daisy said honestly. "I thought about all the reasons this is too soon and too crazy. But then I realized that I do not care. I want to see where this goes, Garrett. I want to spend time with you and get to know you better and see if what we are feeling is real." "It is real," Garrett said with absolute certainty. "I have never been more sure of anything." They spent the day together, and it was perfect. Garrett showed her around the ranch properly, introducing her to all the horses and cattle, showing her the spring that fed the property, taking her up to a high point where they could see for miles in every direction. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and opinions on subjects ranging from literature to politics to the best way to make coffee. When evening came, they sat on the porch together, watching the sunset, and Garrett took her hand in his. "I am so glad you came back," he said. "So am I," Daisy replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. That first visit set the pattern for the next 3 months. Every Sunday, unless the weather made it impossible, Daisy would ride out to Garrett's ranch and spend the day with him. They grew closer with each visit, learning each other's quirks and habits, sharing kisses that grew more passionate as the weeks passed, building a foundation of friendship and love that felt solid and true. Daisy's teaching was going well. Her students were eager to learn, and she found real satisfaction in watching them progress. But increasingly, she found herself counting the days until Sunday, living for those precious hours when she could be with Garrett. The small cottage beside the schoolhouse felt less and less like home, while the ranch, with its wide open spaces and the man who made her heart sing, felt more and more like where she belonged. It was early November when everything came to a head. Daisy had been teaching for about 3 months, and the school board approached her about extending her contract for another full year. It was a good offer, more money than she was currently making, and it represented security and stability. But when she rode out to Garrett's ranch that Sunday and told him about the offer, she already knew what her answer would be. "What are you going to do?" Garrett asked, though she could see the anxiety in his eyes. "I am going to turn it down," Daisy said. "I am going to finish out this school year because I made a commitment and I want to see it through. But after that, I am not renewing my contract." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Why?" he asked. "You are good at teaching and you like it. I do not want you to give that up for me." "I am not giving it up," Daisy said. "I am choosing something else. Garrett, these past 3 months have shown me that what I felt for you from the beginning was not just infatuation or gratitude. I am in love with you. I think about you constantly. I count the hours until I can see you again. And when I am with you, everything just feels right in a way that nothing else in my life ever has. I want to be with you, not just on Sundays, but every day. I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep in your arms. I want to build a life with you." Garrett stood up and pulled her to her feet, his hands cupping her face as he looked into her eyes. "Daisy Emerson, I have been in love with you since the moment you climbed down from that broken wagon, looking fierce and beautiful and completely out of your element. I have been trying to be patient, to give you time to figure out what you want, but every minute away from you is torture. Marry me, be my wife, help me build this ranch into something amazing. We will have a good life together, I promise you that." "Yes," Daisy said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Garrett kissed her then, a deep, passionate kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, he swept her up into his arms and spun her around. "When?" he asked. "How soon can we do this?" "I need to finish the school year," Daisy said. "That will be May. Can you wait until then?" "I will wait forever if I have to," Garrett said. "But May sounds perfect." The next 6 months were both the longest and shortest of Daisy's life. She threw herself into teaching with renewed energy, determined to give her students the best education she could before she left. She also spent every free moment planning her future with Garrett, visiting the ranch as often as possible, learning everything she could about running a household in the Arizona territory. Garrett started making improvements to the house, adding on a larger bedroom for them to share, fixing up the kitchen, building furniture with his own hands. Jose returned from Flagstaff and was delighted to hear about the engagement, offering to help with the wedding preparations and promising to teach Daisy everything she needed to know about ranching. Word spread through Ash Fork about the engagement, and while some people thought it was scandalous that the schoolteacher was planning to marry a rancher she had barely known 6 months, most were happy for her. Mrs. Frost became one of her biggest supporters, helping her plan a small wedding ceremony and offering advice about married life in the territory. As May approached, Daisy found herself getting nervous and excited in equal measure. She was saying goodbye to one life and stepping into a completely different one. But every time she saw Garrett, every time he looked at her with those green eyes full of love and promise, she knew she was making the right choice. The school year ended with a small celebration, and Daisy's students gave her a gift they had made together, a quilt with each child's handprint embroidered on it along with their name. She cried when she saw it, touched by their thoughtfulness and already missing them, even though she knew she was doing the right thing by leaving. The wedding took place on a beautiful Saturday morning in mid-May at the small church in Ash Fork. Daisy wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Frost had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Garrett had picked for her that morning. Garrett wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, looking handsome and nervous and completely devoted. The ceremony was short and sweet, attended by most of the town, and Jose, who stood up as Garrett's best man. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Garrett he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was full of promise and joy, and the beginning of their new life together. After the ceremony, there was a small celebration at the ranch. Jose had cooked a feast, neighbors had brought dishes to share, and someone had a fiddle and played music for dancing. Daisy danced with Garrett under the stars, his arms around her, and felt happier than she had ever been in her life. When the guests finally left and they were alone, Garrett carried Daisy over the threshold of their home, setting her down gently in the bedroom he had worked so hard to prepare for her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates," he said softly. "Home," Daisy repeated, and the word had never sounded so sweet. Their wedding night was everything she had hoped for. tender and passionate and full of love. And when she woke the next morning, wrapped in Garrett's arms, sunlight streaming through the window onto their bed, she knew without a doubt that she had made the right choice. The next few years were not always easy, but they were good. Daisy learned how to run a ranch household, how to preserve food for the winter, how to help with the cattle when extra hands were needed, how to shoot a rifle to protect the chickens from coyotes. Garrett proved to be everything she had believed him to be: a devoted husband, a hard worker, a man who respected her opinions and valued her partnership. They had their struggles. The first winter was harsh, and they lost some cattle to disease. There were droughts and lean times when money was tight. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating together during the good times. 2 years after their marriage, Daisy gave birth to their first child, a son they named Gabriel, after Garrett's father. The birth was difficult, and there were moments when Garrett feared he might lose her, but Daisy was strong and determined, and she came through it safely. Holding their son for the first time, seeing the love and pride in Garrett's eyes, Daisy felt a completeness she had never known was possible. Gabriel was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Ruby, who had her father's green eyes and her mother's determination. And 2 years after that came another son, Samuel, who was quieter and more thoughtful than his siblings, but no less loved. The ranch prospered as the years passed. Garrett expanded the herd, built new outbuildings, and established a reputation for raising quality cattle. Daisy started a small school right there on the ranch, teaching not only her own children, but several neighboring children whose families were too far from town to attend the Ash Fork school. She found that she could have both the teaching she loved and the life with Garrett that filled her heart. Jose became like family to them, a beloved uncle to their children, and a trusted friend to both Garrett and Daisy. He eventually married a woman from Flagstaff and brought her to live on the ranch, building a small house for them on the property. As the children grew, the house was filled with laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of family life. Gabriel showed signs of becoming a rancher like his father, following Garrett everywhere and asking endless questions about the cattle and horses. Ruby was independent and fierce, announcing at age 5 that she was going to be a doctor someday and never wavering from that dream. Samuel loved books and would spend hours in the corner reading, much like his mother. On quiet evenings after the children were in bed, Garrett and Daisy would sit on the porch together, just as they had done on that first day when she had come back to visit him. They would talk about their day, make plans for the future, and simply enjoy being together. "Do you ever regret it?" Garrett asked her one evening, about 10 years into their marriage. "Giving up teaching in town to come live out here with me?" Daisy looked at him in surprise. "Never," she said firmly. "This life, our family, everything we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed of. I love teaching, and I am grateful I still get to do it in my own way. But you, Garrett, you are the best thing that ever happened to me." "I feel the same way about you," Garrett said, pulling her close. "That day when I came across you standing beside that broken wagon, I had no idea my whole life was about to change. You were this amazing woman who had come out of nowhere, and somehow you chose me. You fixed my wheel and asked me to follow you home," Daisy reminded him with a smile. "How could I resist that?" "I meant it literally at first," Garrett admitted, "just so I could fix your wagon properly. But somewhere between that first meeting and watching you drive away, it became so much more. I wanted you to follow me home, not just for a day, but forever. And here I am," Daisy said, "forever." As the years continued to pass, the Yates Ranch became a landmark in the area. People knew Garrett as an honest rancher and fair dealer, and they knew Daisy as a woman who could teach, heal minor ailments, help deliver babies, and run a household with efficiency and grace. Their children grew up strong and healthy, each finding their own path, but always remaining close to their parents and to each other. Gabriel did indeed become a rancher, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Garrett aged. At 21, he married a sweet girl from town named Clara, and they built their own house on the ranch property, starting the next generation of Yates ranchers. Ruby kept her promise to herself and became a doctor, going east to medical school and then returning to the Arizona territory to practice. She set up a clinic in Flagstaff, but visited the ranch often, and eventually she met and married a fellow doctor who shared her passion for healing. Samuel became a teacher and writer, moving to Phoenix but coming home every summer with his wife and children to spend time on the ranch that would always be his true home. Garrett and Daisy watched their children grow and thrive with pride and satisfaction. They became grandparents and then great-grandparents, their house always full of family during holidays and special occasions. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Garrett took Daisy back to the spot where her wagon had broken down all those years ago. The road was more developed now, with regular traffic and even some telegraph lines, but the basic landscape remained the same. "It all started right here," Garrett said, standing beside her and looking out at the desert. "If your wheel had not broken, if I had not come along when I did, we might never have met." "I think we would have found each other somehow," Daisy said. "I believe some people are meant to be together, and we were definitely meant to be." "I am glad we did not have to wait to find out," Garrett said. "I am glad I got to spend these 30 years with you, and I am looking forward to spending 30 more. "At least 30 more, Daisy agreed, kissing him softly. They did not get quite 30 more years together, but they got close. Garrett lived to be 78, still active and working on the ranch almost until the end. He died peacefully in his sleep with Daisy beside him, just as he had wanted. His last words to her were, "I love you," and she held his hand as he slipped away. Daisy grieved deeply for the loss of her husband, her partner, her best friend. But she also celebrated the incredible life they had built together. She remained on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and she lived 5 more years after Garrett's death. When Daisy passed away at the age of 81, she was buried beside Garrett on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the valley and the mesas beyond. Their graves were marked with simple stones that bore their names, the dates of their births and deaths, and a single line that Gabriel had chosen. They followed each other home. The ranch stayed in the family for generations after that, passed down from Gabriel to his children and then to their children. The story of how it all began, with a broken wagon wheel and a cowboy who offered help and asked a woman to follow him home, became family legend, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. The small school that Daisy had started continued as well, eventually becoming a proper schoolhouse that served the area for decades. Her teaching methods and her belief in education for everyone, regardless of background or circumstances, influenced hundreds of students over the years. But perhaps the most lasting legacy of Garrett and Daisy Yates was simply the love they had shared, a love that had started suddenly but had proven deep and true and enduring. They had shown everyone who knew them what a real partnership looked like, what it meant to choose each other every day, to support each other through hardships, to celebrate each other's joys, and to build something meaningful together. Their story proved that sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected moments, from broken wheels and chance meetings, from having the courage to follow your heart, even when it seems too soon or too crazy. They had taken a risk on love, and it had rewarded them with a lifetime of happiness. Years after both of them were gone, people still talked about the Yates family, about the ranch that had started with 2 people who barely knew each other, but recognized something special when they found it. Young couples in the area would sometimes visit the graves on the hill, hoping that some of that enduring love would bless their own relationships. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, you could almost imagine you saw 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old ranch house, holding hands and talking softly, still together, even in memory, still home. The legacy continued through the generations, with each child and grandchild and great-grandchild carrying forward the values that Garrett and Daisy had embodied: hard work, integrity, kindness, and above all, the belief that love was the foundation on which everything else was built. The ranch itself remained a working cattle operation, but it was also a place where family gathered, where stories were shared, where the past was honored and the future was welcomed. Gabriel's son, Garrett Jr., named for his grandfather, took over the ranch in the mid-20th century and modernized many of the operations while still maintaining the core principles that had guided his grandparents. He married a woman named Sarah, who reminded everyone of Daisy, with her intelligence and warmth and the way she could make anyone feel welcome in her home. They had 4 children together, and the ranch continued to thrive under their stewardship. Garrett Jr. often told his children about their great-grandparents, making sure they understood the significance of the land they lived on and the love story that had created their family. Ruby's medical practice became legendary in the territory, and eventually in the state of Arizona, after statehood was achieved in 1912. She lived to be 92, sharp and active until nearly the end, and she credited her longevity to good genes and the example of love and commitment her parents had shown her. She never forgot growing up on the ranch, learning from both her mother and father, and she made sure her own children understood the importance of family and dedication. Samuel's writing preserved many of the stories of the early Arizona Territory, including a memoir that heavily featured his parents' love story. The book became a minor classic of Western literature, helping to shape how people understood life in that time and place. He made sure that his parents were portrayed accurately, not as mythical figures, but as real people who had worked hard, loved deeply, and built something lasting together. As the 20th century progressed and the world changed dramatically around it, the Yates Ranch remained a constant, a connection to the past and the values that had built the American West. It survived the Great Depression, both world wars, and all the social and technological changes that transformed America. Through it all, the family remained committed to the land and to each other, guided by the example Garrett and Daisy had set more than a century before. Visitors to the ranch, whether family members or occasional guests, always commented on the feeling of the place. There was something special about it, something that went beyond the physical beauty of the land or the quality of the cattle. It felt like a place where love had taken root and flourished, where generations of commitment and care had seeped into the very soil. The house itself had been updated and expanded over the years, but the original structure that Garrett had built remained at its core. The porch where Garrett and Daisy had spent so many evenings was still there, now weathered and worn, but carefully maintained. Family members still gathered there on special occasions, sitting in the same spots where their ancestors had sat, looking out at the same view of the valley and the mesas. In the barn, which had been rebuilt twice after fires but always in the same location, there was a small plaque mounted on one wall. It marked the spot where Garrett had repaired Daisy's wagon wheel all those years ago, the place where their story had truly begun. The plaque bore a simple inscription that had been suggested by one of their great-grandchildren. Here, love was built to last. The schoolhouse that Daisy had started eventually closed as a school, but the building was preserved and converted into a small museum dedicated to the history of education in rural Arizona. Her teaching methods, her dedication to her students, and her belief that education could transform lives were all documented and celebrated there. School groups from across the state visited to learn about the woman who had given up a comfortable teaching position in town to build a life in the wilderness, and who had found a way to continue her calling even in the most challenging circumstances. The church in Ash Fork where Garrett and Daisy had been married still stood, now much larger and more modern, but still serving the community. In the church records, their marriage certificate was carefully preserved, a piece of history that connected the present to the past. The minister who currently served the church liked to tell their story to young couples preparing for marriage, using it as an example of what commitment and partnership could achieve. As the 21st century arrived, the Yates Ranch was still family-owned and operated, now in its sixth generation of continuous family stewardship. The current owners, descendants of Gabriel and his wife Clara, ran it as both a working cattle ranch and a heritage site, offering occasional tours to people interested in Western history. They took their responsibility as custodians of this legacy seriously, making sure that the story of Garrett and Daisy was told accurately and with the respect it deserved. The graves on the hill had become something of a pilgrimage site for romantics and history enthusiasts alike. The family maintained them carefully, keeping the headstones clean and the area landscaped with native plants. Visitors often left flowers or small tokens, and there was a guest book where people could write their thoughts and reflections. Reading through the guest book, you could see how many people had been touched by the story of Garrett and Daisy Yates. Young couples wrote about how the story had inspired them in their own relationships. Older couples celebrated decades of marriage by visiting the graves and remembering their own commitment. People going through difficult times wrote about finding hope in the idea that true love could overcome obstacles and build something lasting. One entry, written by a woman who had just celebrated her 50th wedding anniversary, summed up what many felt. Thank you, Garrett and Daisy, for showing us all that love is not just a feeling, but a choice we make every day. Your story reminds us that the best things in life often come from taking chances and following our hearts. Rest well, knowing that what you built together continues to inspire generations. The family held a special celebration on what would have been Garrett and Daisy's 150th wedding anniversary. Descendants came from all over the country, filling the ranch with noise and laughter and the joy of family reunion. They shared meals, told stories, looked through old photographs, and marveled at how one couple's love had created this enormous, sprawling family tree. During the celebration, the current ranch owners unveiled a new monument near the house. It was a bronze statue depicting a cowboy helping a woman down from a wagon, capturing the moment when Garrett and Daisy had first met. The statue was beautiful and evocative, but more importantly, it captured the essence of their relationship. One person reaching out to help another, and both being transformed by that simple act of kindness and connection. The inscription on the base of the statue read, "Her wagon wheel broke in the middle of nowhere. A cowboy fixed it and said, 'Follow me home.' She did, and together they built a legacy of love that continues to this day." Garrett and Daisy Yates, 1882–1965. Their love story reminds us all that the greatest adventures begin with a single act of courage and compassion. As the sun set on that celebration, with multiple generations of the Yates family gathered around the statue, someone suggested they all move to the porch to watch the last light fade from the sky, just as Garrett and Daisy had done so many times. They crowded onto the porch and spilled out into the yard. But they were all together, all connected by the love story that had started it all. One of the great-great-grandchildren, a young woman named Daisy, in honor of her ancestor, stood up and proposed a toast. "To Garrett and Daisy," she said, raising her glass, "for having the courage to take a chance on love, for building something that has lasted long beyond their lifetimes, for showing all of us what commitment and partnership really mean. May we honor their memory by loving as fully and living as purposefully as they did." "To Garrett and Daisy," everyone echoed, and the sound of their voices carried across the valley, a tribute to two people who had started with nothing but a broken wagon wheel and a willingness to follow their hearts. The story of Garrett and Daisy Yates became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create something lasting. It reminded people that the most important moments in life often come when we least expect them, and that having the courage to embrace those moments can lead to more happiness and fulfillment than we ever imagined possible. Their ranch, their family, their love story, all became part of the fabric of Arizona history, woven into the narrative of how the West was built, not just with sweat and determination, but with heart and hope and the willingness to believe in something bigger than oneself. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, perhaps Garrett and Daisy Yates still sit together on a porch overlooking a beautiful valley, holding hands and watching the sunset, still in love after all these years, still grateful for the broken wagon wheel that brought them together, still home in each other's hearts. Their story proved that sometimes the greatest adventures are not about traveling to distant places or achieving fame and fortune, but about finding the right person to share your life with and building something meaningful together. It proved that love at first sight can be real and lasting if it is followed by commitment and work and the daily choice to cherish and support your partner. It proved that taking risks, following your heart, and believing in possibilities can lead to a life richer and fuller than anything you could have planned. The legacy of Garrett and Daisy Yates lives on not just in their descendants or their ranch, but in everyone who hears their story and is inspired to believe in love, to take chances, to build something lasting. They remind us all that our choices matter, that our actions have consequences that ripple through time, and that the love we create in this world is perhaps the most important and enduring thing we can leave behind. In the end, their story is simple but profound. A wagon wheel broke, a cowboy helped, and two people chose love. From that choice came a family, a ranch, a legacy, and a reminder to us all that the best things in life begin with an open heart and a willingness to follow love home, wherever that may lead.